Okay, so Claudia, you were saying before our internet clash that okay, so uh, so when Evo was trying to run for leadership and so forth, the folks that basically blocked him from doing it, they were appointed by they were appointed by ex President Louis, but Louis did not appoint. This is going to be a shock to many people. He did not appoint members of Moss. He didn't appoint left wingers. He appointed right wingers, and those right wingers that are changing constantly the rules of term limits and so forth keep. It's always one rule for them, and then another rule for leftist and insurgent leftist
Yeah,
chapters. So,
yeah, but just one correction. He's the current president. It's not former president. Luis had to say.
okay, outgoing president, yeah.
Yeah,
So talk so
yeah.
talk to us
So
yeah so talk to us a bit more about that and yeah yeah go ahead.
yeah. So I mean, just to say that one aspect of this broader campaign and strategy of ensuring that the popular bloc would not actually be represented in the elections, and therefore the lithium could be easily at the disposal of imperialists and capitalists uh, abroad and the internal neocolonial elite. Um, is that so? Now the runoff elections are happening in October or November. Now I'm forgetting exactly when, but later in the year. And as I mentioned in the article, the what is certain to come is certain neoliberalization, certain opening up of these markets and trying to essentially whatever neocolonial and imperialist and capitalist administration ends up doing is gutting whatever social safety nets there are and to ensure that whatever state company, particularly lithium state company and the plants, you know, less and less under state control and more under private control. Um, so yeah, this Bolivia. I don't take Bolivia as an isolated case, even though there are very particular conditions, right? And I think that it's very important when we think about, well, unfortunately, the defeat, right? Because it truly is and remains to be the largest movement of indigenous campesinos, farmers, etc., to ever one galvanize around a political project and organize themselves within various levels of society in order to actualize that political project, not just through the electoral system, but through a participatory bottom-up democracy, right? And again, and it remains to be, like I said, not just in Bolivia, but in the region, one of the largest movements to ever actually attain political power. So I don't think, and certainly they are not thinking it this way, that, all right, well, we're done, I guess. All right, we're going to wrap it up because they lost, right? It just means that the terrain of their political struggle looks different now, right? Um, but yeah, so that's a little bit of what happened in Bolivia, and I think right
And
that
president
chapter. No, just saying that chapter remains to be, written.
okay, so safe to say President Louis basically uh well he kind of he basically did what Lenin Moreno of Ecuador, which you've covered before, has done. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to talk about we're going to talk about Peru later, but the current well illegitimate president of Peru. She was part of Castile's government. So basically, Louis, you think that you think that he's part of the movement. He's an economics minister. He's part of the party, and then when he gets into power, he basically, yeah, talks left, but then governs as a right winger. Is that fair to say with what happened in Bolivia under his?
Yeah, yeah. yeah, I would say, you could see that in through multiple angles, right? Particularly the economic crisis that has hit Bolivia for the past at least year, but a little bit longer now. That really is it's multi-pronged, right? But one of the aspects is there's truly a lack of diesel, right? So gas prices are crazy. The lines at the gas stations are insane, right? And you also see this just in terms of transportation, right? So um, what I did to get around Bolivia, what many people in the global south do to get around, and particularly in South America, is just take buses, right? Pretty long, sometimes I've been on 20-hour bus rides that, oh man, it can be rough, but that's fairly common, particularly as you're traversing around in the Andes, the literal, one of the largest mountain terrains in the world. So those travels end up taking much longer, right? Because there's a diesel shortage, right? The economic crisis, and just basically the inflation that comes along with that is what is directly impacting and what the masses of Bolivia are saying. This is our material conditions that have worsened under the Arce government, the Arce administration, right? And a lot of the things that we, as a political party, as a political project, were trying to advance have been held up, often because the Congress, the Senate, right, is not entirely like any other governmental structure in any country. They don't have a full 100% uh, dominance of the Senate, so they have to struggle, they have to debate, right? They have to, quote unquote, compromise. And so certain um, particularly economic reforms, have not been advanced, and the crisis has just worsened and worsened and worsened, to the point that it's at one of the like the inflation rates is one of the most alarming and rising in that part of the region.
That's crazy. And all of this started when Bolivia was ruled by the Western backed Christian fascists, and Louis during all of this time didn't fix that crisis because he already decided to sort of pivot to the right. I assume then, or
Well, again, I think that is something that is still remains to be seen, but I think um, just from a materialist perspective, right? Not just his administration has shown signs of collaboration with the right wing and with elements of the U.S., right, particularly the FBI and DEA, but also his family members. His son has been very vocal and active about trying to sell Bolivia's lithium, right, to the highest bidder. So I think it's too hard to put together the elements of what forces and interests are behind his, you know, as some of the comrades in Peru say, right? You go in sideways and then you straighten yourself out once you're in, you know. So they
unbelievable.
change their ways based on what interests they are representing.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Another clarification is so and wasn't and Evo also trying to, well, he basically kind of like started his own independent party with mass what, and when I say mass, I mean like masses of people in Bolivia with
Right,
with mass
right,
support, and then he was blocked from participating in that.
right. So there was multiple assemblies and then a national assembly um, for the creation of a new political instrument and party called Evo Pueblo and the Unity Pact. Um, they, because of the certain laws and stipulations around elections, because they did not have, because they don't have any seats, right? It's a new party. They had to run under another political party. So they ended up running under two, Frente por la Victoria and then Partido Nacional de Bolivia. I'm butchering it, but something like that. Both of those parties, again, were blocked by the electoral board, and this was an ARCE-dominated electoral board from running. So that is what prevents the new political party and instrument from taking part in these elections.
Okay, so it's
Right. So you can see the lawfare that is playing out in the background, right? And so I mean, this is for years now. Naval supporters and mass base of Bolivian society have seen how as his administration has gone over to the right in a lot of aspects, right? The repression, particularly around the repression against Evo supporters and the marches that he had called for multiple marches. One a month before the assassination attempt last October, and then another one a few months after. Um, Actually, and then they had just had another one a couple of weeks ago. And all of these marches, there were close to 4 million people, right? So when certain
so
leftists,
if anybody's
you know,
if anybody's demobilizing the left, it's not
right,
Evo being an egomaniac, but you can blame Louis himself. He is actually demobilizing the left. It's correct.
right. And again, I don't think that, yeah, generally speaking, I'm not one to rush to make commentary. And I'll just say, I became a journalist not because I wanted to do journalism. I came to journalism through organizing because it was a organizational and political objective of having a very particular type of media, right? So I come at covering stories and covering situations not from an individualistic journalist point of view because I want to get my name out there. I come at it from what are the objectives that need to be, met, and how can they be done through media as a strategy, right? So maybe I understand that those are very different sort of understandings of journalism, I think. But I don't. Yeah, this is not a lucrative career, let's say.
That's a perfect segue then to this question. And again, I want you one more time hit it out of the ballpark to people who would say the following: couldn't Evo have set his own ego aside and trained someone to be a challenger to Louis of the same or similar indigenous working class background, and would then be leader of this new alternative party? And Evo could have trained and supported someone else close to him, a kindred spirit that would have done his bidding, and that of the working class and indigenous majority communities, who are, of course, the base of the new party he was trying to do, and of course, Mass, which got taken over by Louis and his only movement for socialism in name only. What would you say to those folks?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's important to honestly important to listen to people that they are referring to, and it's not just political figures, right? Or yeah, it really isn't just political figures, but understanding that these are months, if not year long processes of genuine bottom up democratic control. So this sort of what I consider counterinsurgency strategy that played out was to ensure that the lithium and the resources that rightfully belongs to the masses of the people of Bolivia and the region would be in the hands of U.S. imperialists and the local comprador elite that work with and are including figures like actual far right Nazis from Croatia that post World War II end up in Bolivia, right? So you have literal fascists and Nazis that are shockingly anti-indigenous and a majority indigenous population and country that have been pissed the fuck off for the past 20 years that an Indio could possibly be in power.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So I guess, yeah.
And okay,
No,
so
I was just gonna say, I guess I would end it there.
no, but then also, but it's also important to, and I think it's also important to clarify is that a majority of people in Mas, or certainly a huge faction, wanted Evo to be president, and Louis says no. Then here comes, then okay,
Mm-hmm.
fine. I'm going to start a new party, and there's millions of people who are supporting that, and then Louis's cronies who again are right wingers and not leftists of any kind, basically block that from happening. So I think it's very important to do it. So just like in so again, just like what we saw in Ecuador, just like what we saw in Peru, and just like what we saw in Brazil, where Lula was barred from running from a politicized far right judiciary, and the same in Argentina. Cristina,
Mm-hmm.
complete victim of lawfare
Mm-hmm.
and grotesque politicization, barred
Mm-hmm.
from barred from running. This is and yeah, this is basically like like what happened in Bolivia, correct?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You see this throughout the region, right? And for multiple reasons, right? We see up and down the Pacific coast, from Panama all the way down to the border of Chile, Southcom building up bases, right? And I mean, Ecuador itself is like one giant military base at this point with Naboa there, right? And Prince, right? So we're talking about not just Southcom and the U.S. military, but NATO forces that also join in these joint military exercises with Southcom and with the militaries of these different countries. Um, we're also talking about IOF.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Yeah, you're back.
sorry. Okay. Yeah. So we're also talking about IOF training and weaponry when it comes to um, the U.S. EU NATO axis of domination in the region, right? It also includes a bastard child in West Asia, right? Occupied Palestine. Um, so we see that throughout the region, it's for a multitude of reasons, right? Like I said, the Pacific is being essentially the U.S. and the West is setting up the Pacific coast for an eventual war with China. Right, we see an encirclement of Venezuela happening not, predominantly from the Caribbean, but also from the Pacific, like I just mentioned, up and down the Pacific coast, and this very recent land dispute between Colombia and Peru in the Isla Santa Rosa, which is in the Amazon, right? So it's not directly on the border of Venezuela, but it certainly gets the U.S. a lot closer to Venezuela through Colombia, right? So it's essentially what they did in Syria, which is the pincer strategy, right? And encircle Venezuela from all angles, right? And also just saying that, when talking about, recently raised the fact of how I got to journalism was through organizing. How we got through that and to that analysis is again through organizing. Um, Particularly within the Zone of Peace campaign and the Popular Steering Committee, we have organizations from all parts of the region so that we are able to sort of share notes and be like, oh, this is happening here. Oh, this is happening here. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay, this is what, so we're able to see from a zoomed out approach and an actual, like, you know, an actual regional approach that is guided by the Global South, our Global South comrades, um, what the terrain of war actually looks like. Um, so yeah, Bolivia, Peru, these are all different aspects of the war games that the U.S., Southcom, NATO is imposing on our people, and like I said before, right, like since the Monroe Doctrine and continuing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So What's next for Bolivia then? What can we expect from this? So stupid question. What can we expect from this new incoming right wing government? And is Musk finished? And will Evo's new left party be a force to reckon with? And even if he continues to be barred, is there anyone else who you think will rise through the rank and advance socialism and push back hard against the new Western-backed far right, who have already made plans? Our friends at Orinoco Tribune broke this news. They've already made plans to release the Christian fascist who was put in
Mm-hmm.
power after a Western-backed coup a couple of years ago.
Right, right. Right, and I think that that's actually very important to raise when we consider what has happened and what is happening in the Arce administration is only favoring the U.S. and the right wing in that country. So then maybe we should question what the motives are and perhaps say, actually, I don't think that there was really restoration of democracy.
Yeah.
I think that, in fact, the Arce administration and this recent, since 2020, this government has just been, a left veneer with right wing interests, right? And imperialist and capitalist interests. So um, I guess to answer the question, comes next is, as always, organization. That's what comes next, and that's what has been happening. So, the positioning is now, a defensive one, perhaps, but I think for a while it has been a defensive one in terms of the Bolivian masses, right? They've been saying for the past few years, this is not our government, right? There's there's been at least almost 100 political prisoners since these mass marches that started last September, right? Heavy repression, uh, at least two martyrs, potentially more that I know of, right? So this is not, these are right wing governments. These are right wing, yeah, this is blowback for having dared to have 2 decades of more of a people's democratic rule.
Here's hoping. Even if Evo continues to be barred, here's hoping that he'll that's and it's not and again it's not just about him, but here's hoping that the party and the movement finds somebody that can
Mm-hmm.
restore true
Mm-hmm.
democracy and and indigenous racial social justice, even eco justice and so forth. So here's hoping that
Mm-hmm.
happens. And that is a perfect segue to this question, which is, tell us about what's been happening in your home country of Peru, what's been going on with the far right agenda of Boulart and the resistance to this latest chapter in Western backed far right tyranny in your home country.
Mm-hmm. Well, so as you mentioned, the neo-colonial Bolivarian regime continues to be in power. This is um, since December 7th of 2022. There has been a U.S.-backed right-wing coup government in place, and we had been under dictatorship despite, what at the time the Antony Blinken State Department, rubber stamped the Boluarte government. That's not actually been the case, right? There's been at least 50 martyrs, if not more. I think actually that number is closer to over 70, but based on some of the bigger human rights names and the reports that, for example, Human Rights Watch has released, the number that they have been reporting is but at least 1,500 still injured, people that are still living with rubber bullets in their bodies from the resistance to this coup, right? And the resistance to the coup was predominantly from, even if it was in Lima, it was coming from the outer regions of Lima, right? What we call the conos, right? The northern and the southern cone, which are some of the poorest areas of Lima. Um, Literal like shanty towns that don't have plumbing or potable water, right? And the same thing in the other regions, particularly in the southern regions, which is in the mining corridor, right? the part of the country that has the largest amounts of resources, that unsurprisingly also correlates with the amount of massacres that took place, right? So we were talking before about the Lithium Triangle that includes Puno. Puno, in Juliaca, was the place on January 9th, 2023, the largest massacre of the Boluarte regime up to that point, and since. Uh, 19 people murdered in one day, and even in that situation, that was or in that massacre rather, the participants weren't even just from Juliaca, which is the city, but they came from down from the mountains, right? These are farm workers, indigenous farm workers, right? Youth that were coming out and had enough of it, have seen their lands being poisoned, their waters being poisoned, have seen, right, the very real impacts of global climate change and the militarism that is directly linked to that climate change, right? They're the ones that are, they're at the front lines of this particular front, this particular struggle, right? Um, so that struggle is continuing. This past July 28th was the 204th, I believe, Independence Day, and the second, or I believe the third, of this current regime, right? And there were masses of people that came out, similar, like hundreds of people that came, maybe thousands actually, from the south that came up to Lima to protest against the regime, right? Boluarte gave like a 5 hour speech at Congress in which he kind of very openly stated, like, yeah, I rule for the right wing, I rule for moneyed classes, like it is what it is, like very open. Um, so I mean, at least that's honest.
Unbelievable.
Better than it was before.
Unbelievable.
Um, right, and so not just families of the martyrs, but various sectors of the population um, came out against that, and protested against Boluarte, and that day also included a message, live, I guess, yeah, I don't know if it was live streamed, but it was a message from President Castillo, who's still behind bars in Penal Barbadillo, and essentially just giving a message of, in terms of our Independence Day and where the struggle is, and hundreds of people came out to listen to that message, and in from Penal Barbadillo, you could hear this literally the voice of a person who is one still being tortured all of these years later, still being locked up under pretrial detention, and now it is the trial, but for most of this time that he's been locked up has been under pretrial detention, completely against his, human rights. But he's not the only one. There's been plenty of political prisoners during this um, current regime. One of his former ministers, who was also locked up, was just released. Betsy Chavez, she was just released after also hundreds of days locked up, right? So it's certainly somewhere that a situation that we've experienced as a country before in terms of severe political repression, and going after any kind of leftist, right? Even a whiff of socialism is enough, right? Um, but masses of people are still struggling. Currently, I think today or maybe yesterday, students at San Marcos University have gone on strike to protest, to defend free tuition, free and public tuition in the university, and a lot of the organizations and associations in the other parts in other sectors of Peruvian society have been sending out statements of solidarity, right? And yeah, so I think that people understand, at least people that are in the struggle, in the streets, right? understand that this has been a very long, protracted struggle, right? When I speak to the comrades, particularly in the South, most of whom are indigenous, right? They understand that this struggle has been going on since, you know, uh,
Spanish,
so
yeah,
quote unquote Spanish colonialism, right? And
yeah.
then even since then, right, the creation of a neo-colonial republic state, this has been a very long, protracted struggle. So they understand that as well. And I think, you know, again, sort of thinking about this struggle, not just in terms of country by country, but regionally, right? They are also creating bonds with those comrades in Bolivia, with those comrades in Argentina, with those comrades in Chile to discuss and strategize like, well, shit, what are we doing? You know, because they're very organized. We, not so much. So we should get organized.
Yeah, yeah. And wait, 1 moment. Just killed a
Oh my
mosquito.
God.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Yep. Nope. Okay.
Well, you already answered. you already you already answered what are the conditions of the political prisoner, former President Pedro
Mm-hmm.
Castillo, and how he's faring. And it doesn't sound like he's faring very well. But the resistance to this far
Mm-hmm.
right tyranny is happening. I guess my
Mm-hmm.
second to last question is why so little international mobilization on the part of the left, even those who do Latin American
Mm-hmm.
solidarity folks,
Mm-hmm.
and even the best of the anti-imperialist, anti-war folks, not including Black Alliance for Peace, of course, which you're a part of. But yeah, why so little attention and even mobilization on what's
Mm-hmm.
happening in Peru?
Yeah.
I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, you know, multiple reasons, but I assume, right, that it's not one, it's not necessarily in vogue, right? It's not when it comes to especially like solidarity struggles. You know, it's not a Cuba, it's not a Venezuela, right? I mean, Nicaragua doesn't get as much support as Cuba and Venezuela do either, right? And we can there are many reasons to talk about that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but I think, you know, and we've spoken about this before, the Western left often is behind some of our comrades in the global south, and but have a lot of opinions on what their struggles should look like, right? So I think that sometimes this sort of Western chauvinism also shows up on the left, right? And it shows up in ways that you don't see as much support for Peru as you would for a Cuba. You don't see as much support for Bolivia as you would a Cuba, right? And I think some of
Well,
the, you
and
know,
even and
some of the
even then,
reporting,
and then even then you don't see a lot
yeah,
of and then even then you also don't see a lot of global leftists, and shame on the Africans and the black majority countries showing solidarity for Haiti, and then saying the most bizarre lazy things like, oh, it's so complicated what's happening there, or oh, it's come on, it's just a bunch, it's just games, like what do you want us to do? It's like, wow, really. So,
right,
yeah.
right. Well, I mean, Haiti is a very, you know, not to exceptionalize Haiti, but I think that that is what the West and what the rest of the world does, right, in terms of Haiti particularly, but you know, the global South in general. So I guess, yeah, for a multitude of reasons, there's a lack of support, and you know, I think it can probably be. I don't know. I will constantly implore folks in the global north to not just learn from our comrades in the global south, but actually take lead from them in terms of like those struggles are far advanced. And I mean, one, because they are facing the bulk of that imperial violence, but also they're far more advanced when it comes to organizing because that's, can you imagine talking to Western people like not only like, oh, what union, labor union are you in, but what neighborhood council are you in? What regional municipality are you in, right? Like people organize at multiple layers of society, and that type of organization is just not at all seen in the West, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, just a little bit of humility from the Western comrades would go a long way.
Well, and then not only that, I this is another topic for another day. The problems of like the left and when the left gets under my skin. But we see that sometimes, like you take you take the Nordic countries for example, the Scandinavia region of Europe, which sometimes very good on international relations when it comes to like Palestine solidarity, the anti
Mm-hmm.
apartheid settler colonialism in South Africa, and yet in their own country, within their own countries, engaging in apartheid or gross indifference to the suffering of the Sami
Mm-hmm.
people and the institutional racism of the Sami people, the
Mm-hmm.
indigenous Greenlander people. When we talk about Denmark and Greenland, and it's shocking how sometimes you see
Mm-hmm.
the left in Europe engaging in Romophobia and the marginalization of the Roma, Sinti traveler people, and so forth, and then the U.S. I've complained to you that sometimes the best of the left in the U.S. Uh, overlooks the plight of Native Americans and so forth like that. So yeah, so it's it's annoying, but and we have to do better.
Yeah.
We have to do better. And if people say, "Well, I'm trying to do my best," well, our best is not enough. We have to do much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. I agree. The West, I think the left in the West, left, right? There is no left in the U.S. That's something that organizations and organizers and activists are saying, but that doesn't this. But regardless, I do think Western leftists often have not really thought through and incorporated an analysis of settler colonialism, right? And therefore, when it comes to trying to build coalition with some of our indigenous comrades, right, brothers and sisters, or what, and it's not just indigenous to those particular lands, but throughout, fail to make that connection, and therefore, right, it's well, why can't we build a coalition with those folks? Well, if you're not considering the very structural, foundational issues of settler colonialism, then the analysis is only going to go so far.
well, here's hoping that changes very soon because it has to. Last question, Claudia, is the following. So before we end our talk, you are actually working on a documentary project, and how can people, generate and you need people to donate to donate generously to you because you have no government funding, no wealthy NGOs or foundations or nonprofits helping you out. So how can we help help you out where do we need to go to make a little donation to this documentary project you're doing,
Oh, absolutely.
so go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for plugging that. I often fail to, plug that myself. But my co-producer, co-director, I guess, and comrade are going to be working on editing part of it, or a bulk of what we have from, this is footage that I have basically a couple of weeks after the coup started, and the few times that I've gone back, including this last time that I went back, and I was there for about a year. Um, anyway, so we'll be probably launching a more formal, um, GoFundMe or whatever. But certainly people can, hit me up on PayPal.
Oh, uh-oh. 1 second, folks, we will be right back. Oh, actually, okay, she's coming back, she's coming back. Hey, Cloud. Wait. Oh,
No, no, so
okay, okay,
sorry.
okay,
I'm
good,
not
okay,
sure what
okay.
happened.
Okay. You're coming back. You're coming back. Just need your screen to be very okay. Just need your screen to be somewhat good.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So
Okay.
people can hit me up on PayPal.
Okay. So
Should I finish that part?
yes, and if people want to get in touch with you to donate, do they just go on your Patreon and so forth, or
People can go on the Patreon. Probably the more direct way. Before we launch the actual GoFundMe,
yeah?
people can just find me on PayPal.me/Claudia O'Brien 35.
Okay. Well, you okay. Make sure to send me that so I link it into the show notes, and that way, yeah. So and alrighty. Well, we were
Perfect.
well.
Perfect.
We were joined on this edition of One Plus One, our all things Latin America, all things Bolivia and Peru, with the wonderful Claudia O'Brien Moscoso, our beautiful, wonderfully stupendous Peruvian American indie journalist, leftist, anti-imperialist activist, contributor to Black Agenda Reports, and a member of Black Alliance for Peace. Claudia, take care, stay safe, but always vigilant and militant. Keep up with the great work you do, regardless of how tough it is. You are doing the Lord and humanity's work, and you're doing us a very good solid. So keep up the great work. Have a great weekend, folks. Good night and good luck.
Thank you.
And before we close, happy birthday to my dear friends Moxie and Jay Watts. Jay, who is a frequent guest and a good friend to One Plus One. I hope you all spoil yourselves and have a great weekend. Only wish I could be there. All my love until then, folks. Good night and good luck, and we'll see you. We'll see you when we see you.